Today, out and about in sunny New Zealand. Hello again, it's Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics. Welcome to our latest post covering finance and property news in Australia and New Zealand. And today I'm joined by Joe Wilkes. Hello, Joe.
Hi, Martin. How are you?
Yeah, good. So you've dried out because, boy, when you were walking around those properties the other day, you looked as like a drowned rat.
Yeah, well, I decided to take a weekend trip up to the Bay of Plenty, and it's normally the sunny part of the country where Aucklanders go to escape the dreary conditions in Auckland. And I got a little bit wet. In fact, I've come back home, and today it's raining here again. So we've got a bit of artificial light on the subject, and hopefully we'll have a bit of a chat about what I saw over the weekend.
Okay, so let's just start. The Bay of Plenty, that's north of Auckland, isn't it? Is that right?
It's out on the coast, not north of Auckland. It's out on the eastern coast of New Zealand. It's quite a big port town. Been quite a rapidly growing city over the last 5-6 years. It's been subject to a lot of development. It is now and has been New Zealand's fastest growing city outside of Auckland in terms of population and growth. Big port. It's where a lot of the primary products that leave New Zealand go from, and it's a town that has quite a bit of tourism, local-based tourism, but also the cruise ships come in. Quite a nice little approach. Got some fantastic beaches, beautiful place to go and visit. Nice when the weather's good, but it was an interesting weekend, real eye-opener for me.
So just to be clear, it would be not seen as a commuter belt for Auckland. It would be seen as its own economic centre. Is that right?
Very much so. It's 2.5 hours at the best to get back to Auckland, which is really too much for a daily commute. I mean, people do commute there for a week and then they come back to Tauranga at the weekends. But I was quite shocked. It was an interesting drive around. We saw some fairly strange stuff going on.
Okay, no, that's good. I just think it would be good, because a lot of people may not know, particularly if they're watching this internationally. We've got quite a big international following. And by the way, people from Canada really like the New Zealand coverage because they can see amazing sort of resonances between what's happening there and what's happening over in Canada, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, well, they've got a bank bail-in as well that was sort of passed through legislation. I think in Canada it was done with a bit of a fanfare for some reason. It'll put depositors' money at risk in the case of a banking event. In New Zealand, it slipped through under the last Key administration. John Key now works for ANZ Bank. And to be fair, I don't think a lot of people really understand over here the risks that they face if they are putting money in the bank.
Yeah, well, perhaps we'll do a separate discussion about that because, of course, the Reserve Bank governor made a couple of comments on Friday which also were quite interesting.
They were
but anyway, let's focus on your trip. So you're 2.5 hours east of Auckland, right?
Yeah.
In a rainstorm. But what did you find?
Well, I wanted to drive around because we've got an awful lot of narrative at the moment in the press, which I have concerns about where the stories are coming from. So I wanted to just find out for myself by taking a drive up to a town where there's been a lot of hype about shortage of properties. It was really interesting. I drove in on Friday night and the weather wasn't too bad. And there's a really lovely long stretch of beach that runs from Papamoa all the way up to Mount Maunganui, which is coastal. And you've got, I don't know, probably 18, 19 kilometres of beachfront. So I thought, well, I've got here late-ish. It's getting dark. I'll drive down the waterfront. And there's lots of housing developments that have gone on down there. And what staggered me was that it's dark. Not late. I mean, I'm hoping that people in Tauranga do stay up later than 9 o'clock at night. But there were very, very few houses with lights on. In fact, there's been a lot of talk about Tauranga being an Airbnb destination for investors buying properties. And we think we're start of summer, we're in the holiday season. There was a stretch of probably about 5 kilometres where I would say less than half of the properties had lights on them. So whatever's happened from the investment perspective in New Zealand, there are a lot of houses that are just sat there idle, even in the summer holidays. I went from there into Tauranga city centre and did see a few homeless people who were sort of cobbled together in shop doorways. Wasn't as big or as large a number as I thought I was going to see, because there's a lot of talk about homelessness there and in Auckland. Unfortunately, they were reluctant to be filmed, and I can understand that. So I was able to have a couple of conversations with people, and in essence, they're struggling to get the money to even service the bond to pay the rent on these properties. And from a social perspective, it's not nice. Thankfully, the weather on Friday evening wasn't so bad. By Saturday, you would not want it to have been homeless, because I struggled to spend more than about 5 minutes out of the car. So it's a bit of a strange one. Saturday was a fairly wet day. Morning, Martin. This is Joe. I have taken a trip up to Tauranga this weekend. I think I'll best describe it as taking one for the team. Weather's not the best. But this is meant to be the Costa del Sol of New Zealand. But it's a little bit wet and windy today. But I'm going to try and do some filming anyway. There's a lot of talk in New Zealand, as we've talked about previously, about there being a housing shortage, and I've just come to look at a development that I was last up here 2 years ago, and they were sort of well underway with this development, and I just wanted to sort of show people around and just highlight the housing shortage that isn't really, because there's an awful lot of building going on. There's an awful lot of empty properties that I'm walking past who they've been finished for a while by the looks of it, but they're struggling to sell. So welcome to Papama Beach. Excuse the camera work today. It's very windy. So we've got lots of individual spec builds. We've got another one next door that looks fairly new. There's a couple of people living in some houses down there that are empty. We've got some more building work going on here. Not sure. Looks like maybe the one of the Three Little Pigs is building that one. I'm not sure if that'll be there at the end of the weekend. It's looking a bit flimsy. We've got some more down here. There's another one there. Going over the road, empty plot. Second of the Three Little Pigs is building that one in the background there. We have got some people living in a couple. Just going down the road a little bit. I'm going to be outside for a few minutes because it's a little bit wet. And, so there are people living in them. There's a house for sale down there. I'm not sure if there's anyone living in that one. There's someone living in there. We've got another one here for sale. A little bit of building. I'm going to get back in the car and drive around somewhere else. I spent a large part of that day driving around a number of developments that have sprung up. I was last in Tauranga 2 years ago, and this development had started, but it's really gathered pace. And anyone who says that there's a shortage of property coming on stream in Tauranga, they're lying to you, because there are hundreds and hundreds of houses that are in the way and being produced now. I went to several sites. There's a couple of beach sites that are down in Papamoa, and you walk around and I don't know how to describe it. It's very different to the sort of development that I've seen in the past. When I've spent time in Spain, obviously worked in the UK for a number of years, but I did look at Spain from a property perspective. I've been to Ireland and seen their building boom in the 2000s. I've spent time in Cyprus, which is still suffering a hangover of hundreds of empty buildings. And I've also been to what you'd call holiday destinations like Cape Verde off the African coast, where there was a huge building boom in 2003, 4, 5. Where massive complexes were built for the holiday market, which I suppose Tauranga is, and where, in fact, I was in Cape Verde last year, so you're looking at 11, 12 years on, there are whole sites where there are hundreds of houses that have been built where the windows are in but nobody's living in them, and they're just sat there as bad debt on some bank's books. They've never put the infrastructure in, so there's no shops, there's no restaurants, there's no community, and these buildings are just falling apart. They're derelict, I know from experience that RBS, who went through a major banking issue, they hold a lot of that debt in Cape Verde because they were getting greedy. So Very, very different around Tauranga, in that there aren't so many of the major building firms. New Zealand doesn't have very many major building firms. Fletcher's is a big builders, and they're going through some challenges at the moment. They're profit warnings again this year. In fact, 2 profit warnings recently. And it tends not to be these big building firms that get the investment to go and build a site of 100 houses. What you find is that land gets parcelled off, and the banks spread their risk by encouraging the speculation of mum and dad investors into buy a plot, hire a builder, build the house, maybe you rent it out, maybe you sell it, make some capital gains, off we go. And as a result, what you find is that there's very, very little control of these sites. So when I was driving around, and hopefully I'll show some of the clips, it's less serious than I'm being this morning. I was too wet not to be serious, if I'm honest with you. But if you drive around, you can see that there are houses that are half built next to empty plots, next to other properties that are constructed and are for sale already. There are other people who've bought and moved in and are reselling already. And these are sites where maybe people have only been in them for 12 months.
Another little development in the southern end of Papamoa as you're coming out, going towards Te Puke. Let's have a wander around. I'm enjoying this. Nice sunny today, so I don't mind doing a bit of filming outside. It was crap yesterday. Crap. Who would want to live here? I am joking. It's actually gorgeous up here. So yeah, we've got. I was just going past that nursing home. I was driving out and came across another development, and there's all sorts going on. I'll drive around. It's faster. It's more entertaining as well. If you add a bit of danger, the risk of crashing, I think we'll do that. Okay, here we go again. More building. Lots of it. This is another very big site, and there's a lot that we've got some people living around here, possibly. Maybe not. That looks empty. That looks empty. Here we go. Some more houses. The first little pig's building the first one. Second little pig building the second, and the third little pig. I don't think he's over here because I think he was building proper houses. We've got another empty one here. What did Bruce Willis say? Come out to the coast, we'll have a few laughs. This is ridiculous. So we've got lots and lots of infrastructure. Somebody's paid for all this roading to go in. We've got sections for sale. Very, very slowly. Thankfully there's nobody around. These have all been built and there's not really very many people living up here, so I'm probably pretty safe here today. So I'll just carry on back up the way we've just come. All of these on the way. Buy a parcel of land, hire a builder, get them to build it for you. Builders must have loved it. Sell it on. You'll make a fortune. What could possibly go wrong? Where the bloody hell is everybody? This actually reminds me of large parts of Spain, except that it was generally a bit hotter and drier. In about 2006-07, and shit, there's more down there. So all of these are being financed at the moment. There must be, because there's nobody living in them. This is probably why ANZ are playing those adverts that we showed last week. I might ask you to add those to this little offering today. Oh, it's quite phenomenal. I'm going to sing a song for you, Martin. It goes. Boom, 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 boom. I'll shoot you right down, right off your feet. Take you home with me. I'll put you in my house. A boom, 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 boom. Pow, 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 pow. What a mess. I'll sing boom, boom, boom. Do, 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 do. Do 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 Please come and buy them! People, we need more purchases. Quick, smart, there's a whole lot of money tied up in all this construction. Quickly, come and save us! We're going to need to import another 1.5 million people, I reckon, to get some buyers for these. There's another little... Oh, what's going on down here? Oh my goodness.
There's obviously a lot of stress in this market. But my concern is that it's the mum and dad investors who have gone and put their eggs in this basket, and we're not talking about one or two people. We're talking about hundreds of people. The beach developments, still lots going on. There is no shortage of land in New Zealand, so that's one thing that we have to factor in. We've got a population of just under 5 million in a land mass the same size as the UK, so we don't ever have to worry about inventing land to build on. But what appears to happen is that these sites get passed. Somebody owns the land in the first place. It then gets sold off, and that's where the landowner makes their money. The people who are actually taking on board the risk are the people who are financing that, either through remortgaging their own property or through using their retirement to get into the building game. This isn't wholly Tauranga is the only place in the country that's like this. Obviously I'm going to need to do some more investigation, and we're going to need a bit of help. If people want me to go to other places, we'll take some requests, but we're going to need a little bit of assistance. But yeah, no, you just drive around. The other thing that shocked me was where they've built some of these developments. I went out for leaving Tauranga on the way as if you're going towards Auckland. You've got a place called Pies Pa. There's a big development there, which is, again, it's half done. Buildings that they're timber, doesn't look like there's anything happened other than putting the timber frame up. Next to houses that are complete. Awful lot of empty homes. The Lakes District. It's a good drive into Tauranga in the morning. They seem to have got a number of people to go and buy these sites, but there's no infrastructure. There's the promise of a big supermarket and cinema complex, but they're a long way away. And my feelings are that if this creates a lack of desire to go and take on the debt to buy these houses, and we're already struggling, I think, in terms of finding first-time buyers to get into this bubble. These sites could end up like many of the sites that I've seen in Spain and Ireland and Cyprus, but where the risk will be on a large number of people.
So just to sort of recap, what we're seeing is independent builders, essentially, mum and dad investors, effectively building on individual plots. So effectively plots at all states of undress, from vacant plots through to half constructed, through to properties that are actually occupied and for sale, right?
Yeah.
Firstly. Secondly, a significant number, so not just one development site, but multiple development sites in the area. Right?
There's loads of them, I think if you look at it, obviously the builders have been attracted to these areas, so they've moved up and they've taken the work. It's far easier to go and build a house from scratch when you really lump down the concrete and off you go, than it is to worry about doing someone's extension. Extension's a hassle. You've got to shore up walls that are existing. You've got to go and dig land, move ground. Here you're dealing with largely flat sections. But we're not talking about one or two sites. I drove around 5 sites, which were enormous, and we're talking about hundreds of sections that have been sold. And there are roads where you'll drive down, you'll see one house that looks really nice. Sometimes there's someone in it, but quite often there's nobody in it. And then you've got a half-built house next to it, 3 empty plots, somebody else who's not done anything or even mowed the lawn on their plot, so it's overgrown. And you look at it and think, well, if I was starting off in life, and the fact that these developments are so unregulated, so have people been just speculatively buying the plots for a few $100,000, thinking, oh, it's all right, I'll go and flip it on for $100,000 more in 3 years? If they are doing that, you could end up with whole streets and towns almost. They are the size of small villages where you're living in a ghost site. I wouldn't personally, and I'm talking about someone who, I've got a young family. There's no way I'd take the risk of buying into some of those sites, because you could be living in a building area for the next 30 years. It's not attractive, and it's because it's been unregulated and it's not been controlled. I was driving out of Tauranga, sorry, out of Papamoa on Sunday morning, and I just stumbled across something else, which I think is going to be a really big part of the housing bust that we're going to see. There's no other way we're not going to see a housing bust, and that was the retirement complexes.
I am still up in the Bay of Plenty today. The weather is slightly better than it was yesterday. I've just been up to another development south of Papamoa, Palm Springs development, where there are again lots and lots of houses being built under construction. I've rather than duplicate some of the stuff we did yesterday, what I've done today is I want to show you another part of New Zealand's housing boom, and this is the retirement villages that are sprouting up all over the country, and they very much rely on retirees being wealthy enough to afford to buy them and pay for the ongoing charges that they have to pay monthly to live there in their latter years. So here we've got a development which is just outside Papamoa, and you can see down here we've got quite a few houses that have been built. There's a number of them that are ready for the market. Most of them appear to be empty at the moment. And there are several roads that go off this. They don't look particularly comfortable, if I'm honest with you. They're quite boxy. I'm not sure if I'd want my mum living in them, if I'm perfectly honest. She made the decision herself, perhaps. But my guess is that the banks probably also have a little bit of money tied up in all of this lot here, which they haven't built yet. And obviously somebody's going to need to buy them, and to be able to afford to buy them and pay the charges, they're going to need to have some people spending quite a lot to buy their existing houses, I'd imagine. But there's an awful lot of building that's gone on and is going on. This is just one of a number of retirement homes all over the country. As you can see, it's a bit quiet. I know they're full of old people, but it's like nearly 10 o'clock and nobody's awake. In fact, I don't know where they park their cars. They're not allowed them cars when they move here. It's actually because there's nobody here. They haven't sold very many, I don't think. But anyway, I better get off before I get in trouble with the site warden. So I will speak to you later. Hi Martin. Still on the same retirement village. You can see we've got even more houses down here. Some of these look like there might be people living in them, perhaps. And we've got some more down here. It's very quiet. So I'm not actually sure how many people are living here. There's some chairs out on that one there. But some of these others, they look a bit, I don't want to say deathly quiet in a retirement village. That's not very nice, is it? But I've just said it, so never mind. Okay, so you've got quite a lot here. Now the thing with these retirement complexes is that they're all done on the promise of wonderful retirement. You go and live in these places and they provide all sorts of other facilities, which is great as long as I've got the money to make sure that the other facilities get finished. I'm not sure, for example, whether this building here, which I think is meant to house a swimming pool, it's got a lot of plastic all over the top of it, is quite ready to be used. And I wonder, obviously people are paying charges to live here already, but I wonder if there's enough of them yet in the development to keep everything going, because there seems to be quite a lot of construction that's, I don't know if it's stalled, but there's no machinery on this side. I'm just going to poke my head around through the fence. You can see here. There's still quite a lot. Now I'd have thought that in a closed site you'd have kept all your machinery here over the weekend, unless of course you've decided to just hold fire and wait for a few more sales. And if that's the case, then we're going to have a lot of people who are going to need to sell the family homes to to pay for all the work that's not going on here. Interesting, isn't it? Housing crisis. There's got to be about 300-400 houses here that are being planned, but it's deathly quiet. Hi Martin, still just looking around this retirement village just a little bit longer. I've managed to escape the warden, so I'm going to carry on. It looks like they're putting in some nice facilities here. The trouble I think we're going to find is that half the people who've already moved in, and there aren't that many, are they allowed to use the facilities here? They've got a lovely pool in here. I don't know if you can see it. I don't know if it's finished. So people are buying these things on the promise that all of this is going to get done. But I wonder whether there's enough money to get the facilities done fast enough, because of all the debt that's probably outstanding on a lot of the construction. So here's another part of that same development. I don't know how many there are up here. There must be a good couple of hundred, maybe a few hundred. If you look over the fence, you can see we've got all sorts of things that have just started to be done. So there's a lot of money tied up in this, which I hope is being matched with a suitable pace of sales. But we better keep talking this credit thing up, because there's a lot that really needs to be sold here. Okay Martin, I'm going to be quite careful here, but you can see this is the back end of the retirement village. I'm going to be driving for a little bit, but just drive down the road nice and gently. So here we go. This is retirement in New Zealand. They give you your own rabbit hutch, which you get to live in with no neighbours, surrounded by fencing and work. It looks lovely, doesn't it? I think I might put my mum in here for the last few years. Don't tell her. What I could do is get some money out of her house. I wonder if I could persuade her. So yeah, no, interesting, very interesting.
Now, I know that retirement building has been a massive thing in New Zealand. This is just one site that I walked around. We've probably got maybe 300 properties. They're not the most attractive, if I'm honest with you. They're a little bit. It's like going to if anyone's ever been to England, it's like going to centre parks. You don't scenery. You just get these little boxes that are all squeezed up against one another. Railings around the outside, unfinished facilities and amenities, and still dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of timber framing up for sites that they've obviously not bothered going any further on because they can't sell the ones that they've built. So I was thinking about it from perspective. Okay, well, I've got my mother. She's getting on a bit. She's not that old, actually, to be fair. But you're thinking about, okay, well, I'd like to put my mum into a nursing home. First of all, these retirement homes, they're in the middle of bloody nowhere. So as you retire, you're thinking you're in your mid-70s. You might want to walk to something. You're 15 kilometres away from the beach. There is nothing by the way of shops. There's a little bit of semi-industrial stuff around you. You've got one of these other hodgepodge developments just down the road from you. That's not a nice way to spend your 10 or 15 years of retirement. And these projects seem to have stalled. So the unfortunate people who've got in there and bought and have moved in, many of them will, and really we're talking about very, very few people, many of them will be spending the next 5 or 10 years of time that they really should be enjoying the benefit of their retirement and their future, living on a building site. And it's because too much of this is not properly funded when these projects start. What you want is a bank that's going to take the risk rather than an end user, and have the bank funding the whole project so that that there is a definitive time frame when it's going to be finished. When you've got these small projects that rely on the sale of a unit to start building the next one, that's when you get mass housing development that is going to be terrible for the early entrants and for those people moving in. And I think that we're going to see some people making some severe losses on as these houses come to the market. There were quite a few people who obviously rushing to get their projects finished in and that there's just nothing happening.
So I guess to sum up, Joe, this is a really important leading indicator, isn't it, of trouble ahead in terms of high vacancy rates, in terms of things like, partly built, poor infrastructure, poor bank lending, all of that stuff in there. So effectively, this is very much counter to the public perception and indeed the media perception in New Zealand that everything is fine and we've got, significant demand for property. We need to build a lot more. Actually, on the ground, the evidence would suggest something rather different.
Yeah, well, I spoke to a couple of agents up in Tauranga at the weekend. I won't name them because I think it's unfair. It was interesting that one of them, who's been in the business for a while, 30 years, he has put his family home on the market and is looking at selling and moving into another property that he bought a number of years ago. There's no housing shortage in Tauranga. There is stock in that's going to come on stream for several years worth of sales. Some of the deposit offerings. I mean, there was one site where buyers are still being encouraged to buy and can buy a land and home package for 5% deposit. I don't know whether there'll be a lot of people who will carry this on when they see, there's so much stock in the new developments already. When they see that this stock isn't selling, are they going to bother going and investing another $400,000 or $500,000? Because building costs in New Zealand are astronomical in building the land sites that they've acquired in these developments that are defunct, and that has a spiral loop. We've already seen a number of building firms go bust recently in New Zealand. They're not typically the big ones. Many of them, however, they're not the ones taking on the risk, and that's the thing that I'd like to highlight to everybody. The builders are there, they're contracted, the banks are selling the debt. It's the owners that are taking on the risk, and just drive around, be sensible before you go and start thinking that you're a property guru, developing expert. Make sure that you really do some research and make sure that if you are going to get involved in this, that where you buy, there is infrastructure in place already, and that you're not buying out in the middle of nowhere on huge swathes of empty land where sites have been sold and where there's no guarantee of when anything is going to get finished. I genuinely think I'll go back to these sites in 10 years' time, and they will still be 50% done.
Yeah, very interesting, Joe. And I guess the point there is also that people would have been thinking about buying these plots or sites with the prospect of future capital gains and growth. And of course, everything that you're saying here and everything we see on the ground is that it's unlikely that we're going to see that capital growth. So effectively, the whole basic economic sort of philosophy and approach which underpins this is probably flawed.
Yep, and the press are still sponsoring it. The narrative of New Zealand is very, very much a gambler's mentality on property. If anybody who watches this post does know anybody in the mainstream press, I'd be very, very keen to try and put this message out there publicly. So please do get in touch with me. I'm on LinkedIn. If you do know somebody who can help us get this message out, it's not it's not a wanting to scare people, but it is something that we need to be very, very aware of.
Yeah, and in fact, there are one or two sites in New Zealand now are not allowing a repost of any DFA content or comments because it goes against the mainstream story.
Yeah, well, that's sadly the press are funded largely by the real estate business and from the banks. So we can't. I recognise that everybody has to make a living somewhere. At the moment, these institutions, the jobs that are there, they do rely on this media. But at the same point, it's a false media, and there's nothing out there that's challenging it. And we're heading down a route that is very dangerous for the economy. We have got time at the moment to make the landing softer than it will be if nobody goes out there and puts a challenge to the realities of it.
Yeah, I think that's the point. And, you can read across a lot of what's happening there into Australia and to other markets too. So this is not just a local thing in New Zealand. It is actually happening in other places too. And it goes back to the fundamental view that we have at DFA that people need to be very, very careful and certainly can't assume that capital growth is going to be there into the future. And remember, interest rates are rock bottom at the moment, and the prospect is also that interest rates will rise later, which will put even more pressure on the story.
Yep, indeed. And this has been very serious. Hopefully the clips that you'll show with this a little less serious and give something for free people to laugh at.
Yeah, well, certainly, Joe, I appreciate your time and your effort and your filming capability. We should say that the audio is a little bit noisy on some of yours because it was so windy, but they're worth watching anyway, and we'll drop them in as we go, as we edit this particular program. Joe, thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it. And I'm sure we'll talk again soon. I think next time we should talk more seriously also about the Reserve Bank of New Zealand and their recent comments, because that is also quite troubling in terms of how they're seeing it as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, look forward to that.
Great, Joe. Thank you very much. See you soon.
Thanks, Martin. All the best.
So there you have it. A very important dispatch from Joe Wilkes in New Zealand. I think he's dried out now. But the key point is that the property sector over there is definitely not as represented in the mainstream media. I'm Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics. Many thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.